As certified life coaches with 45 years combined experience in human resources, Jen Trum and Katherine Fry have both experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, both personally and professionally. What they both know to be true is this: our mental, physical, and emotional health are the essential building blocks in order to thrive and shine in the field of HR. In a first of its kind podcast, we'll be getting real and we'll discuss and share what has contributed to both our success and struggles, with the goal of inspiring women around the globe to stand tall and take the necessary action to both thrive and shine in HR. Here are your hosts, Jen and Katherine.
Hello, and welcome to Thrive and Shine HR. We are Jen and Katherine, and we are so happy to have you here. We are at episode 28, Stand Tall, How to Build Confidence for Women in HR. Hi, Katherine. How are you today?
I'm so great, Jen. How are you today?
Doing excellent. So before we jump into the topic, I would love to hear you got to speak at a SHRM conference this week. Tell us about it. What was the conference and what was the topic? And tell us about your speaking gig.
Well, the reason I applied to maybe 5 state conferences this year, and I was accepted to speak at both Arizona and Tennessee, and they were both this week. And I decided to go with Tennessee SHRM because their theme was about reconnection, reimagination, and renewal. And my app is called Refresh. And I was like, whoa, there's some synergy already here. So I put forth a topic, one of my favorite workshops I lead actually, called Thought Intelligence, the precursor to emotional intelligence. So I call it TQ, prerequisite to EQ. And I could not believe how many other speakers there were on the topic of emotional intelligence, but nobody talked about thought intelligence. So it caught a lot of people's attention. I wouldn't say there was standing room only, but because there were some spots, some empty seats. It was, I think it ended up being 87 people, which there were 15 speakers at the time, at the exact time that I was speaking. So I think we were pretty evenly divided up, which just happened to work out that way amongst the just over 1,000 people at the conference. So it was awesome. It was so great.
Wow. So for those listeners and viewers who are not familiar, how would you describe thought intelligence with 1 or 2 sentences?
Thought intelligence is the ability to manage one's mind and have the awareness that you can actually choose your thoughts and get out of disempowered thinking and into empowered thinking.
Oh, that sounds like an episode.
It was really cool. What about you? What's been happening with you? What's your highlight of the week?
Oh my gosh, this has been a busy, busy week. Back to school happened this week, and it's been just a lot of different odds and ends going on. But I think the biggest highlight of the week was I was able to finish a big project that I've got going on at my work. And that always feels so good, like when you can finally deliver something and feel as though it's not perfect, but it's, is something that has been a long time coming, and that felt really, really good. So yeah, I'm so happy that I'm about to start. We're about to head into, for you and I, for those who, depending on when this hits, about to head into Labor Day weekend. And so it'll be really nice because I've been really excited to get away. We're going to go to the coast and, catch some waves. So that should be a lot of fun.
I love that. A little water, a few days off. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, totally. And I know you're getting to do the same on a lake in Tennessee. So that is just awesome. Both of us are kind of dipping our toes.
Yeah. I took a dive into I haven't been to a lake in over a dozen years. It's totally different than the ocean. So it's pretty refreshing, rejuvenating. Yeah. I can't wait for you to get your toes in the water.
Me too. Me too.
I bet.
Well, why don't we jump in? So, episode 28 is all about confidence and confidence for women in HR specifically. And for you and I, we know confidence is not something that just develops overnight. It's a skill, and it needs to be nurtured. It needs to be cultivated. It really needs to be practiced. And I think, as we get into this episode, we're really going to see that over the course of our careers in HR and as now coaches, we have really come a long way when it comes to how we show up and how we truly can feel and exhibit confidence. And so it'll be a lot of fun to kind of dive into this topic, because we're going to share, our insights and our stories as we always do. And it's an area that I think we all can really learn a little bit more on how to be able to exhibit and really kind of cultivate the type of confidence that we truly desire to have. So why don't we jump in? That sound good?
Sounds great. Let's go.
Okay. First question. So what does confidence mean to you, and how has your understanding of it evolved throughout your career?
Mm. Uh, Confidence for me at the very basic level is just being really certain in your ability. And I think, like so many of us, I didn't go to school for HR. I wouldn't say I necessarily fell into it like a lot of my colleagues say. I intentionally went into HR, but I certainly didn't have any sort of formal education around HR. So I went in being a sponge and wanting to learn. And it took me a lot of years to develop my skill around my confidence in HR. And I want to reiterate, when you opened this episode up so beautifully, I might add, bringing up the fact that confidence is a skill, I don't think people necessarily understand that. You're not born with it. You develop the skill over time, and it's something we have to work on. And I also think back to, I don't know, when you're a child and you're learning how to, I don't know, I think about little kids and big jugs of orange juice and trying to get it into a tiny glass, when you're first learning how to pour things. But now as an adult, I don't think twice about it. And that's the same. That level of confidence can be applied to how we approach HR, whether it's benefit administration, whether it's employment law, whatever it is. The more you do it, the more you get into it, the more you're going to build your confidence. Truly, truly. That analogy is just, that is how we develop our confidence in anything related to our career or anything in our adult lives. So I don't know, a little flashback to childhood. I think it's because I'm staring at my sister's refrigerator right now, and I remember seeing a huge thing of orange juice in there this morning. But what about you? What does confidence mean to you?
I
And how
think that
did it
was
evolve
such
for
a great
you?
analogy. I'm like picturing this huge, jug of orange juice, but what a beautiful way to look at it, because I absolutely relate to that of like being
Mhm.
younger or even younger in my career and
Yes.
looking at others and really not truly understanding or having this belief that confidence was just something either I had or you didn't have.
Totally.
Right. And really struggling with that, because either it was an area that I felt confident and I was golden and no problem, or it was an area that I just didn't have the confidence. And so then I would ground myself in this belief that was total baloney. But yet, when you don't have those skills or you don't have that awareness that confidence is something that can build over time, we can
Yeah.
kind of get stuck in that rut. And I think for me, one of the things that I would see confidence as is really kind of being this like standing your ground and like digging your heels in type of thing,
Ooh.
and that's kind of this idea of what it meant to be confident. And so over time, the reality of that is really about just standing comfortably in your truth.
Oh.
It's about standing comfortably in like your authenticity, and boy, has that like shifted everything for me because that's not so hard, right? That's not so intimidating, but yet, like we said earlier, it is something that takes time because early in our careers and early in our lives, we don't always like know, what who we really are and what really feels authentic and that sort of thing. And so over time, really getting more comfortable with what matters, who we really are, and then being able to come to a place of feeling like we can move forward from that place. But it's so fascinating of how much that has kind of evolved just from a place of learning and getting to know myself better.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Once again, an answer I didn't expect that's getting me thinking.
Well, you too. I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation.
Yeah,
All right,
always.
number 2, let's go into it. Can you share a time when a lack of confidence held you back in an HR role?
Yeah, it just happened. It just happened at the conference. I mean, I think for me, I will always be practicing becoming more confident, and especially when it comes to public speaking. I do HR Empower Hour every week, like clockwork on Tuesdays. I'm always on Zoom. I'm always presenting. I do workshops for regional EAPs. I do workshops for employers all over the region in person. Maybe it was because it meant a lot to me. Like, it always means a lot to me when I do workshops, but you and I have this shared passion of serving the women, especially the women, but our HR community and giving back to the profession that's given so much for us. And I think in my mind, the stakes were higher. I really wanted to knock it out of the park. And I prepared, I went to bed, and I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, just not confident in the presentation I'd put together. And I couldn't sleep. And I remember a mentor in my earlier years saying, listen, when you can't sleep, get up and do whatever you're thinking about. So I got up and I reformatted my presentation. The next thing I know, it is 6 a.m. and I'm still up. I'm still at my desk. So I got about 4 hours of sleep and I was like, well, you can do a couple of things. You can go for a run, go through your normal morning routine, wake up and do some thought work on those, not necessarily positive affirmations, but just getting my head in the right space to present on factually a lack of sleep. And it worked. I mean, I just went with it. I decided it was going to be fun and I was going to do the very best I could. And I did. And it was great. And sometimes I think we just have to go for it. I truly could have called down and said, I didn't sleep last night. I can't present. I'm sick. I can't present. I could have come up with a million different excuses. And instead, I was like, you know your material. And I had to literally go back through the facts that I have been in HR for 27 years. I've presented on this topic dozens of times. And just because I don't live in Tennessee doesn't mean I don't understand HR professionals who live in Tennessee, So just getting over my own, recognizing the disempowered thoughts that woke me up and choosing different thoughts and quite literally taking the action that I knew would help me present better and really be able to lean on my presentation materials instead of not trusting in what I had prepared. So yeah, just happened, a little battle with the old C word.
That is like so fascinating though, because here you are presenting to give this presentation on, thought work and thought intelligence, and here is your brain showing
Oh
up.
yeah. Oh
Right?
yeah.
To kind of just to give you a big old lesson right before it. And so I think
Oh
it's
yeah.
such a good example. And oh my gosh. Well, good for you for like hanging in there and doing what you needed to do so you could feel comfortable really enough to be able to, still show up and make it happen. So
Yeah.
I applaud you.
And the other thing there were so many different types of speakers there, and they had a green room for the speakers prior, of course. And I was in the room with about 5 other speakers, and only one of the speakers had slept well the night before. So even professionals, I mean, some of these people have been speaking for dozens and dozens of years. And there I am, like, hi, I'm 2 years out of the profession and I'm speaking, and it just, I don't know, maybe just knowing that other speakers get nervous too and also don't sleep, it made me feel better.
Yeah.
And it made me feel more confident that I'm not the only one. Anyway.
Yeah, I could totally relate.
I know. Well, what about you? What about a time for you when a lack of confidence kind of held you back a little bit?
So for me, I can think back to multiple occasions, but one in
Mhm.
particular was working with a male manager who had a very dominant personality. And we were having multiple issues with different, employees who reported to this manager. And it was someone that earlier in my career who I struggled with feeling intimidated by, right?
Oh.
Because they were
Mhm.
very, strong personality, very confident in what they said, right? They would come into my office and be like, this isn't working. This is a problem, blah, 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 blah. And I would just freeze, right? Talk about fight, flight, or freeze. I would
Yeah.
freeze in those situations with this
Yeah.
individual because I really struggled with feeling like I could get my bearings in that situation. I didn't feel
Mm.
competent. I felt overwhelmed.
Oh, yeah.
So instead of being able to respond and reply to this individual with clarity, with focus, with, all of that, I found myself, I mean, even looking back, I could remember my voice would be shaky.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just did not feel myself grounded. I felt really all over the place. And so much of that was, again, in my head, right? It was the
Yes.
thoughts that would go in my head that I felt incompetent. But so much of that, in retrospect, when I look back on that, wasn't because I wasn't capable, right? It wasn't because I didn't have the competence, or I wasn't able to address the circumstances as they were. It was because I allowed the feelings to overpower me when, someone else who was more of a dominant personality could kind of have that advantage over me, or,
Yeah.
kind of that perceived advantage over me. So in one instance in particular, they wanted immediately to fire somebody, and they were just all up in arms.
Yeah.
And I just was not able to kind of get myself to a place where I could speak fluently and
Right.
articulately back in that situation, mostly because I truly, at that time, kind of going back to what I was saying, what we were talking about at the beginning, I didn't believe that I was confident. I didn't have that sense of awareness that I
Yeah.
could step it up in that moment and be able to handle the situation. I kind of saw this individual as more of a dominant personality. And so I basically kind of cowered down to it. And so these are the types of moments,
Mm.
for me anyway, that I feel like, you know, it's unfortunate that, that any of us, when we handle a situation where we're in retrospect, wish that we would have handled it differently. But boy, does it give me this great perspective of how far I've come since, because I can
Wow.
recognize how much I've grown through that willingness over time to be able to speak up, to be able to kind of, from a place of, as much as I possibly can in that moment, what is it that I can offer in this situation that's not going to, put me in a place where I don't feel safe, I don't feel comfortable, whatever that might be. And so I think, that lack of perceived confidence really, I think, was something that kind of undermined myself. It was like a
Wow.
self-undermining that I would
Mhm.
do based on a lack of belief in my own confidence. And so, yeah, it's just one of those things that I think I'm able to now kind of see from a different perspective. But I'm really glad that I have those experiences from my past because one, we can talk about it to our audience and our listeners and viewers to be able to say, hey, you are not alone, right? You're not alone in this, even though both Catherine and I can now feel more comfortable in circumstances that perhaps in the past we would not have been able to navigate very effectively. This is
Yeah.
part of what the building of the skill looks like.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so, that's part of the process. Yeah. Okay. Next question. Question
Yeah.
number 3. So, what are some common challenges women in HR face that can undermine our confidence? Thinking of undermining, what are some of the challenges that can undermine our confidence?
Well, one of the biggest ones, and I talked a lot about this at the Tennessee SHRM conference, is that boys tend to externalize failure, and girls, as we're socialized, as we're being raised, girls tend to internalize failure. So a boy will say, for example, I failed the SHRM exam. It was a super tough test, and the room was really hot, so I was sweating and I couldn't concentrate. Whereas a girl would say, I failed the test because I'm a failure.
Yeah.
So it's just how we've been socialized. And women tend to be perfectionists, men tend to focus on excellence. Um, there are just so many different things that I could go into. Obviously, the pay inequality that still exists. Women being paid much less on the dollar. I think it's 82 cents to the dollar now. I'm not sure.
Sounds
I
about
could
right.
be. Yeah, and there's so much wrapped up in that. Just the socialization in and of itself. So as girls, we are taught, be quiet, don't speak unless you've been spoken to. We have to earn a seat at the table. And I don't think it's necessarily just for women. I think it's any protected class under Title VII that is socially, just being a protected class under Title VII tells you that you're not toeing the line the same as white men. If I'm being super direct and being super honest, that's what Title VII is all about. Anyone who doesn't, start at the same start line as a white male, we are told that literally tells us that we have something to not be confident about. So very interesting when I look at it that way. And I don't know, with the last question, again, you really got my head spinning in a good way about when we're in HR and being confident in knowing when equity is applicable, knowing when equality is applicable. And I think for me, going back to the example that you just shared about a male showing up in a certain way and us, not being confident in our abilities to show up in that sort of a way, and maybe not being using our voice to advocate for what we know to be right. I think that for me, that's one thing that really attracted me to HR and keeps me very fully invested in our profession, is that that's the one thing that I know to be true and that I will stand tall for and I will speak up for. Because to me, it's everything. Sexual orientation. I don't know. For me, it's if I'm lacking the confidence to advocate for myself or someone else, I know it's the right thing to do. So it almost helps me dig deep for that confidence, if that makes sense. Like, speaking of standing tall, there are some things that you've just got to stand tall for. And to me, that's everything under Title VII. I know I just went way like this, but you got me going with that last question, and I'm still obviously back at question 2. So hopefully I answered question 3 while also going back to question 2.
You absolutely did. And I'm so grateful that you went there, actually, because, when you talk about our role within, I mean, even just kind of taking gender out of it within
Yeah.
HR, to really be able to stand up and give voice to those who are marginalized in any way, right? Title VII and just any way in different, work environments. Wow, like the more that we can be able to learn and grow and figure out how we can stand tall and stand strong within our own voice, the
Yeah.
more that gives that permission to others to be able to do the same. And it's everywhere still, right? Like, you said that so perfectly well. Like I couldn't have possibly, yeah, it's amazing how much I think there's, opportunity there to be able to say, hey, when it comes to this skill and
Mhm.
building the skill within ourselves, this is, I think you nailed it too. It really comes down to the heart of my why for continuing
Mm.
to be in HR and continuing to want to
Yeah.
advocate for those in HR is
Yeah.
this right here, right? Is
Yeah.
like finding the way to give voice to ourselves, which is
Mm.
really kind of building that muscle of confidence, which then um, seeps out to those around us in a way that can be tremendously powerful and beautiful. So for me, I'll kind of like go off just a little bit more around, the people pleasing
Oh,
aspect of the why, really, sometimes that we hold back, and
yeah.
and really kind of navigating through that and trying to understand what's at the heart of that, the deep need for acceptance and belonging, and these types of things that I think sometimes can trip us up because they're natural. These are how we've been socialized, and this is how, programming works, throughout society. But it's really like such an incredible opportunity to step outside of that and be able to say,
Mm.
well, wait a second, this is kind of the natural order of things. But what does
Mm.
it mean for me to be able to kind of recognize, one, that this is something that I have been doing, that part of the reason, like in that example with the dominant male, a lot of that then comes down to me holding back, not just about the confidence or the fear of speaking up, but
Yeah.
it's also like rooted in this desire to not be a problem, right? To not be seen as, somebody who's rocking that boat. And what the hell is that about?
I'm a
Right?
good girl. Be a good girl,
Right.
Jen.
Exactly. And so that, when you
Wild.
think about confidence, boy, does that trip us up, because if we're really getting to the root of what's keeping us from truly being confident and truly living in our authentic truth, part of it includes that, that not wanting to make waves, not wanting to rock a boat, and then recognizing that all of that is useless.
Yeah.
All of that really is so not necessary, but it's really until we can gain that level of self-awareness, and also being able to kind of shift that and recognize how much potential we have by calling it out, first of all, right? By starting to
Yes.
communicate it, by calling it out, and then by saying, okay, wait, there is another way that we can go about this, and that includes by speaking that truth, so then we can give that voice to others as well.
Boom.
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 But yeah, I mean, I
End of
think,
episode.
but I think, by recognizing that sometimes we are doing that those people pleasing behaviors that we are so accustomed to doing, especially being in HR, we can start to pull ourselves back and say, well, wait a second, am I like giving some weight to some of these like kind of crazy crazy behaviors that
Yeah.
are not helping, and they're only harming when it means that other voices are not being heard, and that, we're not able to really kind of do the advocating for others that we really truly most love about what HR is, right? And
Totally.
who we get to be.
Totally. I love that.
Yeah.
God, I love
Oh,
that last bit, who we get to be. Like, it is a
who we
choice.
choose to be. Yeah. But part of that is about, then owning that and then choosing that every single day. And
Yeah.
there's going to be, we were talking pre-show about, it's been a freaking roller coaster for me this week. So my sense of feeling confident or feeling fully like grounded in all areas right now, not so much.
Yep.
But it's about like continuing to like show up regardless of how I'm feeling about it. They say do it scared, do it
Do it
anyway,
scared.
right?
Yeah.
Just keep doing it, even if you've got the fear and the discomfort and the lack of confidence, because that in and of itself is going to be what's going to help you gain that foundation. So we're going to get into more of that here in
I
this
love it.
next question. So let's jump into it. So how do we, as women in HR, begin cultivating and practicing becoming more confident? What are some tips and suggestions that you can provide to our audience?
It's so funny as we're talking, and I led HR Empower Hour on this topic earlier this week. I'm flashing back to when I started doing workshops on confidence. It's been a couple of years now, and I didn't remember this until we were just sitting here right now. And I think this is a good one. I think recognizing when we're choosing the thought of, I'm not confident, or some sort of disempowered thought, right? I'm not confident. I don't know how. I'm not sure how to go about this. Whatever that disempowered thought is that is aligned with the phrase, I'm not confident. I think just separating ourselves from that self-identification that I am not confident, and just separating it out with, I'm not feeling confident right now, but to become more confident, I will, and fill in the blank. It's almost like, yeah, it's just elongating the sentence. And going back to what you just shared, it's recognizing when it's happening, being okay with it and saying, okay, it's not that I'm not confident. It's, I'm just not feeling confident right now. And this is what I'm going to do to override that. And just keep the sentence going. And it's a way of quite beautifully shifting out of a disempowered thought about a lack of confidence right into empowered action, which something tells me, I hope you're going to bring up my favorite Gen C word of courage. Please tell me you're doing that.
Oh my gosh. So I have taught a class on confidence, and I call it the ABCs of confidence. And courage
Oh
is
my
in there.
God. Give it to me. I
So
need the ABCs.
A being advocating. So the
Yes.
advocation of ourselves, the advocating of, our truth is, so, so powerful, because if we're not speaking our truth, if we're not advocating for what's true for ourselves,
Yes.
confidence is going to be fleeting, and
Mm.
confidence is not going to, it's not going to grow, because it's not really coming from a place that's truly grounded in
Mm.
what's true for ourselves. So I think advocating is something that we have to continually check in for ourselves, check in with ourselves around, am I communicating? Am I advocating for myself? Am I advocating for, this environment, my team, whatever that might be? Because that, I love what you say about empowered action. It's not until we can really get awareness around what it is that might be missing. Where's the gap? Where is
Yes.
where is that need? And then to recognize, okay, what's the plan? What are we going to do about it? And so often I think, we'll see that there is a gap and there's a need, and then it stops. And that's as far as it goes. And so I have that as A, because it's like, it's so, so important that we not let it, end from just recognizing that there is a need, or recognizing that there's a gap, that it has to include some kind of empowered action. So I absolutely love that. B is our belief in ourselves. And I think recognizing that we in and of ourselves, if we are not fully comfortable with who we are,
Yeah.
right? What we bring, our value, our worth. These are things that I think are so like fundamental to our identity. And yet, so often we tend to think that it's going to come to us based on our actions and based on our behaviors and based on, the different things that we do, and not recognizing that through the inner work, through the amount that we can spend really getting to know ourselves, getting to admire ourselves, getting to love ourselves, all of those things are going to bring us to that groundedness that is going to help us become so much more confident. And it's like this natural evolution because
Yeah.
I know who I am.
Yes.
Like I know who I am, and yeah, I'm not going to get it right all the time. But if I know within myself that I believe who I am, then everything is going to be okay. I'm going to have the good intentions. I'm going to continue to move forward from a place of authenticity. But so often that gets lost because we're kind of waiting for some external force to tell us who we are and tell us, where we're supposed to go, versus really just taking that time of spending that, taking that effort of really sealing that in for ourselves. Because I know for myself, as I
Mm.
became more and more involved in coaching and more involved in HR leadership, the more that I became clear about who I am and believed that I knew who I was,
Yeah.
then everything else worked itself out. And so I think that's a huge, powerful thing. And then C is courage. So
Yeah.
you'll never,
There it is.
you'll never be able to like truly get to where you want to go if you're not willing to take that first step and
Yes.
do it scared, to do it anyway. But the courage to just be able to put it out there is such a huge superpower. And so, yeah, so those are my
I love
non-copyrighted
the
ABCs of
ABCs.
courage.
I feel like I just had the most warming, delicious bowl of Campbell's vegetable soup with a big A, B, and C on my spoon. Like that was
Too cute.
pure love, what you just shared. So warming. That was good, Jen.
Okay, we got two more questions, and
Okay.
thank you. Thank you for that. And you too. I mean, this is so much juice coming into this episode. I hope you all are taking some notes. All right, what advice would you give to someone who feels like they're faking it rather than feeling truly confident?
Yeah. I'm sorry I keep talking about I shouldn't say start off with I'm sorry. A lot of women do that. I'm actually not sorry. I was at this conference for 3.5 days and I go all in at conferences. I love to learn, and I watch speakers very differently now than I used to. I watch their techniques and what they're doing and how they're moving around the room and engaging the audience. And I just remember thinking, especially when I went to SHRM National 2 years ago, instead of being intimidated by the speakers, I started introducing myself to the speakers. And
Ah,
I did. I was like, well, I'm their age. And sometimes they were a lot old, whatever. I just felt a kinship with the speakers. And I introduced myself to every presenter that I went to this time around as well. And I can't speak for the other speakers. I just know I was not trying to be anyone other than myself. I don't watch TED Talks and try to be like a certain person on a TED Talks. I'm not trying to be Brene Brown. I'm not trying to fake it till I make it. I'm just not. Because for me, that doesn't start with authenticity. And when I first started doing live workshops, like in-person workshops, I had a very, very good friend who happened to be in attendance. It was a women's workshop back in Colorado. And she said that when I told my personal story of pay inequality in the workplace, she said the room was silent and everyone was just like staring at me and listening intently. And I didn't notice it because I was just very much into sharing my story. And when I was in Memphis, the same thing happened. Every time I started sharing my story, I was almost in an observer role a little bit. And I was like, whoa, people are actually really engaged in this story that I'm sharing. So I just realized that all my trials and tribulations, when I get really vulnerable and I share those as a speaker, as a presenter, as somebody who wants to model the power of vulnerability, you can't fake your story, I don't think. I mean, you just have to share your truth. And I think that not only helps me build confidence as I do more speaking and I do more workshops, but it also encourages others to work on their skill of confidence. It's almost like this social contagion amongst women. Like, if she can stand up for pay equity, pay equality, I can too. And that's the sort of influence that and impact I want to have on this world. And again, it goes back to, it's not even a choice. It's something I have to do for other women in our profession. That's the way I see it. It's like, I don't have a choice. Like, I have this story that I need to share because I don't want other people to feel alone, and I want other people to stand tall for what's right. I don't know. That's how I'm feeling, Jen. What do you think about faking it? Wait, that was weird.
Oh, I didn't even go there, girl. Oh my
It
gosh.
just flew out of my mouth. I'm sorry.
No, you are totally good. Quite honestly, how we describe how we feel in environments where it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, it's new, it's awkward, all
Yeah.
of those things can feel like faking it, right? Whatever story we might be making up in our head, that's where it gets like off the rails sometimes for us. And so one of the things I really recognize within myself is going through those fluctuations where at times I do feel like do I feel authentic or does this feel, does this feel fake? And it's like, we got to check ourselves in those moments. And it's, can be really tough to do because, so often we might be in a situation where we're kind of flung, where we need to give a presentation at work or we need to have this hard conversation and we're not feeling as confident as we need to be. And so, what I really, really, have encouraged for myself over the years, and I encourage for others, is just recognizing how easily we can align with our authenticity, align with our intentions, and then everything else is just going to be what it's going to be, right? First time you ride a bike, first time we do anything, it's going to be awkward. It's going to be uncomfortable. And if we're
Yeah.
going to label it as feeling fake, or we feel like as though we've got imposter syndrome, or we label it as this, or we label it as that, all of those things, just like, you were talking about being in front of, a bunch of people, they're not going to know necessarily, especially if we can just own our truth in that moment. I
Yeah.
remember giving a presentation. I took a break for quite some time because I'd gone through, some stuff, and I didn't speak for a good year in front of other people. And that first presentation that I gave after about a year of not speaking, I was shaky. I was uncomfortable. It was
Yep.
awkward. And I I would say I went the first 10 minutes of that presentation and didn't say a word about it, right? I tried to just power through, tried to grit it, right?
Uh-huh.
And I recognized myself about 10 minutes in. It was almost like kind of an out of body experience where I could see myself and I'm like, you know what? I really need to own this right here, right now. And boy, did that shift me, and it shifted the dynamic within the room, because now I was just letting out. I say, you know what? I just want to be honest. It's been a while since I've given a presentation. I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable. I'm sorry if I'm all over the place. And that in of itself gave myself a little more lightness, a
Yep.
couple of laughters within the room.
Oh yeah.
But that's, for so many of us, that's just such a hard thing to do, right? Where we feel like we're going to look weak. We feel like we're going to be, less than in some way. And that is like the key, I think, to being able to shift it, is when we own that truth within ourselves. Nobody cares, right?
Nobody
Ultimately,
cares.
they don't really care. It's really within ourselves to be able to say, you know what, I'm kind of feeling nervous right now, but I know this topic. I love this topic. I'm doing my best. And that, I think, I'll never forget it, because that was the
Yeah.
first time I ever really did anything like that, where I actually like spoke up in the middle of a presentation about how nervous I was. But
Yes.
yet I went through the rest of the 45 minutes of that presentation and nailed it.
Yeah.
And I think that is just a real hard shift for so many to make. But when you are talking about like this idea of, oh, I feel like it's fake and I feel like, it's not authentic, it's like, well, of course, it's going to feel that way, especially if it's your first time or second time, or you're in
Yeah.
this new environment. Give yourself a break.
Yeah.
Give yourself a break and
Yeah.
allow yourself to speak to that, or at least within yourself, allow yourself kind of that grace that recognizes that you are doing your best in that moment. And again, that's something that, for me, was not that it did not come easily for a very, very long time. But
Yeah.
ever since that moment, year or so ago, I have really recognized how much people appreciate it.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't
Yeah.
expect that would be something that others would really resonate with, but it creates like this bond between
Yes.
you and others, when you can just allow yourself to be honest about the circumstances and not feel like you have to hide behind anything. So I think that's the essence of my answer,
Love
is
that.
really stop hiding and be honest about what's real for you, because that's not fake.
It's
Right? So
not
that
fake. Yeah.
takes away the fakeness right off the bat, even if you still feel scared, even if you still feel uncomfortable and awkward. All of those things are human and they're natural, and it's absolutely okay.
Yeah. And I know we're talking a lot about speaking, but you just reminded me of a study that I read. When a speaker or a presenter, if you're, presenting a PowerPoint or anything, and you make a mistake, the audience, and you acknowledge it, if there's a typo and you like point it out and you're like, there's an example of my lack of perfectionist or whatever it is, they say it's actually the audience feels more affinity and more that you are more likable and they're more engaged when you quote unquote make a mistake as you're presenting. So that little nugget has always stuck with me. So on Monday, the AV was not working. It was super glitchy. And so the big blue screen would come on like every 5 minutes. And every time it happened, I'd be like, my computer's having a case of the Mondays, and the whole room would start laughing. So just even that, it's have fun. Have fun with it. Laugh at your humanness. And I think that alone, just indulging in our humanity a little bit, also builds confidence.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And if I take the example that I gave a little earlier about, with someone who might be intimidating, somebody who might be dominating,
Yes.
if you're working in that type of environment, what does that
Yeah.
look like right? Like I
Mm,
want to be able to, address, this particular individual or this circumstance, but yet, I feel as though I'm not confident in this circumstance, and I don't want to feel like I'm faking it. And in that circumstance, I would say we can take those same tips and apply it so much similarly by being able to
yeah.
just call it out, but still being honest. And so how can you hold both? And I think it is, going back to the beginning, it is a skill, and it is something that takes some time, but starting to incorporate both of those collectively, right? To be able to, address the fact that, you are maybe challenged and struggling, but also can continue to feel like you could move forward with what you know is right. The right thing to do, the right thing to say, and not holding back based
Yeah.
on allowing that lack of confidence to keep us paralyzed
Oh, yeah.
and and holding ourselves back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen.
All right. Last question. How important is it to have a support network in building and maintaining our confidence?
I think it's everything. I think it's, I know we say this a lot, and I feel as though we're not even doing it justice in terms of who you surround yourself with matters. And because women, especially women, we've been socialized to look for that external validation. If that is you, own it. And if you need people around you lifting you up, cheering you on, saying that was awesome, keep, like, whatever's going to work for you to help build your confidence, go with it.
Mhm.
Don't fight it. I know a lot of women are like, well, I know women have been socialized for external validation, so I'm really working on my internal validation. I don't want to listen to others. I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, if that, like, allow for that external validation, and worth, it's self-worth is the internal, confidence is the external. So work on both. It's okay. I just, again, going back to that green room, and if I had not said, oh my gosh, did anyone else not sleep last night? I could very well have circled in my disempowered thinking of, well, all these other professional speakers in this green room, behind the scenes kind of a room, they all slept. They're all bright eyed and bushy tailed. No. And because I was super vulnerable, and I'm surrounding myself with some people who've been speaking forever, it really helped boost my confidence. And I'm okay with that. It was complete external validation. And I'm totally fine with it because I'm surrounded by people who are also going for it. I mean, public speaking, I believe, is the number one human fear. And death, fearing death, is number 6. Something like that. So, public speaking, if you're afraid of public speaking, totally normal. And if I want to get my message out about gender equality, I got to keep working on my confidence. That's how
Yeah.
I feel. Or else my story's not going to get told. And I know by the reactions that I'm receiving, both at conferences and on social, that people need to know they're not alone when it comes to experiencing pay inequity in the HR field. The irony. Yeah.
Yeah. Amen, sister.
Amen. What about you? Do you feel it's important to have that support network? Is it the same level for you?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, who we surround ourselves around is everything. So if you have a desire to be more joyful, surround yourself around joyful people, right? If you have a desire to be around people who are service minded, surround yourself around people who give back and are service minded. So same goes with confidence. And so finding that community and those outlets to be able to help us. You and I know, I mean, in our 28 episodes in this podcast, being around someone else who really, has
Mm.
kind of the things that you and I exhibit, it feeds off each other and it
Yes.
feeds within our audience. And
Yes.
so, there's something really, really massively powerful about, those we surround ourselves with, because that's who we become. So the more that we recognize that and then are intentional about finding that, and that's something that I think for a lot of people, they feel themselves confined within their work group or their workspace or their immediate proximity. And we are in an age we are in an age where if you want it, if it really matters to you, it's there. You
Yeah.
can't find it. And so if having greater confidence and really being able to be true to yourself in the most authentic way matters, then seek that out. Seek that out in others and find the communities like your HR Empower
Mm.
Hour and other things where it can help you find those like-minded souls
Yeah.
that can help feed you in the way that's going to help you grow in the way that you want to. And I think, that's always the tricky part, right? If I'm trying to surround myself around the 4 or 5 others and I don't yet have that, right? I don't yet feel that I have the confidence or whatever it is in the way that I want to. That's, I think, what ends up kind of building on these fears around not feeling good enough, or kind of this imposter syndrome idea of, well, no, I can't go there yet because I'm not there yet, right?
Yes.
Like I wouldn't want to join that crowd or that community until I've reached the
Oh, yeah.
peak or the pinnacle.
Yeah.
That's such baloney,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And it's really about just push yourself in and recognize that this is how it cultivates, is just being
Mhm.
there and being a part of it. So it takes courage, right? It
Yes.
takes advocating for yourself, and it takes really a belief in yourself that you do belong. And
Yeah.
so by doing that, it's going to help then foster that for yourself. So it's, like it's a part of really recognizing that if there is a destination that you really want to go within yourself, if confidence is something that you can feel that fire within your belly, you got to be intentional. You got to be intentional in finding the communities that are going to best serve that and cultivate that for yourself.
And it's okay to change your community. I think about
Yes.
even back in my drinking days, that the people I chose to hang around with, I wouldn't say they were necessarily problem drinkers, but it was the conversations we had were totally different. And when I went to conferences, I was so socially, I don't want to say inept. I have social anxiety. And so I would be that person, like having one too many glasses of wine at any sort of
3 or
SHRM
4.
conference. Totally. Like I just would. And then I wouldn't be at my best. I wouldn't be able to, my brain wasn't fully functioning the next day. And I hadn't made that correlation until just sitting here right now because of what you just shared. And now I surround myself with different people at conferences. I'm not the last one hanging out, ordering that extra glass of wine, hanging out with the staff who's cleaning up because I've overstayed my welcome. I'm introducing myself to every single speaker. Like it's just really, really interesting what you just shared. And
Yeah.
as we age, if we're lucky enough to age, then we gain this wisdom. I don't know. I had totally different conversations at this conference and found myself with women who've been in the profession a very long time. And the level of conversation was so high and so deep and so engaging. It was, yeah, I guess I'm just outing myself. I used to just drink too much at these conferences. How about that?
Well, I relate to that too, right? Because the last conference that I went to, I was, one of the first ones there in the morning, and I, was
Dang.
engaging in a very, very different way where, whereas in the past, I would have been very similar to you and just holding on for dear life to get through so then
Yes.
I could party with, with people, but then, you're not truly yourself. You're
Yeah.
like this, carbon copy
Mm.
of yourself that's a little bit out of control. And so, yeah, I relate to that so strongly where,
Yeah.
that conference, I was able to like be something and someone so different. And it was a little awkward, as we're starting to kind of figure it out when you're making some changes in yourself, it can be a little bit, kind of riding that bike and figuring it out. But boy, is it a beautiful thing when it does like truly
Yes.
align with, what it is that we really most know for ourselves. So I think that's really, really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, likewise. I'm flashing back to when you shared your experience at the conference and how many people you met and you really put yourself out there. I'm flashing back to
Yeah,
when you shared that. So, yeah, it's the beauty of getting older and evolving, especially in our profession. There's so much to keep learning and so many things to stand tall for.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode. We're just at a full hour. That's perfect timing.
Ding!
And want to thank everyone for hanging in there with us on this episode. This was a powerhouse of an episode, a
Woo!
lot of great nuggets and a lot of good information. So please, if you like what you hear, if you like what you see, make sure to like us, to review us, to share us with friends and other people in human resources. We are so, so excited about this podcast and want to see it grow just like you do, just like our fans out there do. So thank you so much for being there for us. And don't forget, every day is a great day to thrive and shine in HR. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.